Hypixel Skyblock is a massive game with millions of players and a massive audience. However, if you've played this game for any amount of time, you will quickly realize that it's not perfect. Terrible game progression, unbalanced enchantments, and a broken economy plague this great game, and in this video, I will be showing you 3 changes that could solve almost every problem in Skyblock. Please consider subscribing as these videos take many hours to make, and without further ado, let's begin. Number 1. Fixing game progression. Game progression is not going to be solved by nerfing strength or top items. I'm sure many of you can agree with this. The only way late game players are going to be comparable to end game players is to have good transition items. Currently in dungeons, the progression goes from 10 to 15 mil berserker or mage weapons to a 35 mil juju sherpo. Then it goes to a 600 million coin Hyperion and then a 1 billion coin Terminator. There is clearly something wrong here. A vast majority of players are stuck in a gray area where the next step forward is unapproachably far. However, it wasn't always this way. A few months ago, there were a slew of powerful transition items players could use while working towards a Hyperion. It went something like the following. First, you had a 10 mil Livid Dagger, then a 15 mil Flower of Truth, then a 30 mil One for All Shadow Fury, then a 60 mil Axe of the Shredded, then a 140 mil Giant Sword, then a 160 mil set of 5 Boomerangs and a Death Bow, then a 300 mil set of 5 Boomerangs, a Death Bow, and a Giant Sword, and finally a 450 million coin Hyperion. As you can see, the price increments of each meta item were small, and no more than 2 times in price each jump. This made game progression, at least in dungeons, a fun and motivating grind. However, as you're probably aware, the Juju Bow rendered every existing transition item worthless. So that is the first part of transition items. There should be items more powerful than cheaper ones, but they should never cost more than 150 mil more than the previous item. However, as you might be thinking, a new problem arises from transition items, which is deflation. Deflation has been a problem in Skyblock from the start. On release, the Juju Bow was about 150 million coins clean, which is a very fair price for this weapon. However, as more Enderman Slayer drops entered the economy, this bow plummeted in price. This brings me on to my second point. Part 2. Fixing the economy with crafting costs. Crafting costs are a feature of almost every major RPG except Skyblock. There are already many items with crafting costs, like the Golden Dragon Pet, 100 mil Midas Staff, and 150 mil Midas Sword. These supposed crafting costs directly remove coins from the economy, and they stop powerful items from plummeting in price because of deflation. A similar system should be added to all new transition items. If the admins added a powerful new bow, for example, it would cost the materials required to craft and 25 million coins on top of that. This would keep the price of this bow at least 25 million regardless of deflation. Now remember, this would only apply to new items, because if existing items inherited a crafting cost, it would lead to a massive divide of pre-crafting cost items and crafting cost items. Part 3. Skill should be able to compete with coins. Skyblock is not a game that needs a lot of skill. The best items are also the most brainless items, like Terminator and Hyperion. It's simple, you click and everything dies. I think one of the worst changes ever made in Skyblock was the sword swapping patch, but not for the reason you might think. I totally agree that sword swapping was overpowered. However, with the removal of sword swapping was also the removal of an integral part of any video game. Which is, if you're skilled enough, you should be able to compete with anybody. Now this dynamic was true of sword swapping. A player that had mastered triple boomerang swapping and left click mage swapping was able to compete with far richer players with skill alone. This was such a beautiful system which gave players another route to the top other than grinding their lives away. Now, sword swapping was a bug, and it definitely shouldn't be added back. However, I have something that is arguably even better: combos. This is a term that has existed in any combat-based game ever. Chaining hits, abilities, and spells is one of the characteristic parts of any RPG, and Skyblock doesn't really have it. The only instances of combos that I know of in Skyblock are the Grandma Wolf Pet and the combo enchantment, both of which don't make any significant difference. Imagine this: you're playing archer class, and you can hit a mob with the last breath, then throw a boomerang at the mob. While the bone is flying, DPS the mob as much as possible, and then on the return stroke of the boomerang, it will do half of all that damage in one single hit. A complicated combo with tremendous potential. Here is another. You're playing Berserker class. Every time ferocity procs, your rage counter goes up. Finally, when the rage counter hits 500, you can press Q twice. Then, the mobs in a 5-block radius will get sucked into the air, rapidly taking damage from a ton of ferocity procs. The procs will be half of your melee damage to the mob. And this won't work on actual bosses to keep it balanced. The possibilities are endless, and poorer players that have mastered combos will be able to compete with even top players with just one thing: skill. Leveling up dungeon classes will also be able to unlock more combos. As you can see, with just one simple change, classes can be balanced with one another, and players can rise to the top with only skill. So that wraps up my list of 3 changes that will fix Skyblock. These changes will fix the massive wealth divide with good transition items, the economy will be fixed, and transition items will stay balanced with the introduction of crafting costs. Finally, combos in dungeons, slayers, and more will make it possible for skilled players to compete with rich players with just their own talent. There are, of course, a lot of smaller problems in the game that should be fixed, but I think that these changes will fix the main problems. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!